Yeah, and thank you for articulating that. I want to ask you about the Stop Cop City movement that I know you went to visit in Atlanta. And I think you could argue that this is a reason to have hope because there are a lot of people who have mobilized. I think they've been effective. And I know that they've been effective because of the backlash that they have faced for speaking out and standing up and organizing, particularly these people who entered the forest area to stop this cop compound that the Atlanta city wants to build for not just police in the area, but it would be a facility that I understand police forces throughout the US might be able to take advantage of if they wanted to send people there to train. And the biggest thing is that you would be doing deforestation of an area that is in one of the remaining belts of forest that could really help the South deal with climate change. I know that's been an argument of people who have organized, but I want to turn your attention to two things. And this will basically be kind of I know you'll probably have a long answer to this, but I want to get this into our show before we have to wrap. So, first, to note that Manuel Turan or Tortuguita was what he was known by, this environmental defender who we now know from the autopsy was shot 57 times by a cop. And I know you've dealt with environmental defenders in the context of the Amazon rainforest who have been under attack. So you can approach that question. And then the second part of my question to you is just to raise this National Lawyers Guild letter that was just written. I imagine this is happening to a number of people, but I want to mention this case. Tortuguita has gotten some attention. Less attention is to the people who have been hit with these domestic terrorism charges for going to these protests and now are facing these life-altering consequences that could destroy their ability to pursue any career. I don't know if you know this, Stephen, but the National Lawyers Guild wrote a letter to the Chancellor of the University of North Carolina because a law student at the University of North Carolina named Jamie Marsicano has been basically told that they are not allowed to attend their classes. And that's because they attended it was a music festival that was put on in Atlanta in March as part of the organizing to challenge the construction of this cap city. And so, it's not clear that they'll be able to finish their semester, and it's not clear that they'll be allowed to return to in-person classes to graduate. And this is because they've been charged with domestic terrorism offenses in Georgia, which are highly political. And yet this university is going along with what Georgia is doing to these younger people who are taking great risk. So I'll let you can say whatever you want to both of those issues.
Well, I'm glad you raised this. I know Jamie's case very well. I've talked to Jamie on a number of occasions, and I'm going to try to write something about that. But let me just say this. There are 42 people now who are mostly peaceful protesters charged with domestic terrorism in Atlanta as a pure, what I would call illegal deprivation of their constitutional rights. It is a pure political play by the governor of Georgia and his allies in the police, law enforcement, and in the political world. I mean, what's going on in Georgia is really scary. I would advise anyone around the world in the United States, if you actually are progressive, not to travel to Georgia. It's a place where they easily arrest people who speak out against this police training complex or anything related to law enforcement for no reason. Jamie and many others in the same situation are now facing 35-year prison sentences as terrorists. And the law on its face, I believe, as written by the Georgia, authorities, is unconstitutional. But the larger issue is it doesn't really matter to them because they're using the law as a weapon of intimidation, to lock people up without trial, because there's so much that can happen in the procedure of a court case, in a criminal case, to punish people, to impose suffering without getting a conviction. Like, I actually believe Jamie's case and these other cases are going to fall apart with time, but it doesn't matter, because many of them have been in these awful jails in Atlanta for months. Others spent weeks. They were finally bonded out, like Jamie, who has to wear an ankle bracelet and can't even go to class. And I think it's a damn outrage that a university, any university, particularly a flagship state university like the one in North Carolina, would deny a student his or her due process rights based on a completely false allegation that has never been tested in court. I mean, it's just an outrage. And I'm glad you told me about that. I didn't know about the Guild letter. I'd love it if you could get it to me. I want to read that. But people need to pay attention to Jamie's case. It's illustrative of what's happening to 42 people right now, who the police are they're basically trying to destroy their lives to quash what has become a historic protest movement. You know, that what's going on in Atlanta to block this police training academy they're trying to build there costs $90 million. $60 million of the money is coming from corporations. You know, this is the nexus between corporations, police repression, and climate activism, because they want to build it in an indigenous forest, the Weelaunee Forest. I visited there recently. It's just an incredibly beautiful forest. And so they want to raise the last green canopy in the Atlanta area to build a training complex to train police in urban warfare tactics that are going to be turned on mostly minority urban communities. That is more police repression. And the whole thing brings together these movements, and it's really important. And the people who've been living in the forest and so far have been very successful in blocking construction of this completely misguided idea of a training academy. I think I respect them so much. It's inspirational. And, I've always said, and I said this the other day when I was speaking at the Biden rally here in New York, I mean, the stronger the climate movement becomes, or the stronger the labor movement becomes, or the stronger, the movement to stop police repression becomes, the more vicious the other side becomes in response. And we need to be prepared for this. And that is what's happening in Georgia. And I think it's just unbelievable that the Democratic Party, and the senators in Georgia, Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff, have yet to speak out against not only Cop City. I mean, you can even agree with Cop City, but at least speak out against the idea that peaceful protesters are being charged with terrorism, complete abuse of the law, complete abuse of their power. And I think that the criminal conspiracy that's going on in Georgia is one involving the police, prosecutors, and judges who are trying to, thwart a legitimate protest movement protected by our Constitution. That's the criminal conspiracy. So people need to pay attention to Georgia. I'll also say for the international listeners, Tortuguita is the first U.S. Climate activist in the modern era murdered by police. The last 10 years, Global Witness has documented over 1,700 people assassinated around the world for doing environmental justice work, and mostly in Latin America, Africa. We now have that happening in the United States, and people need to understand that this country has crossed the Rubicon. A lot of people, I mean, I don't know about your listeners, but a lot of people around the world think we got it right here. We have the rule of law, and our justice system, is free of corruption, and we work better than systems in many other countries. And what's happening now is it's turning out not to really be true. If you look at my private corporate prosecution, look at the police killing of Tort, you look at a lot of other things, the ethics problems in our judiciary with Clarence Thomas, the Supreme Court justice. There's so many issues now that really raise the broader issue of, does the United States really live under the rule of law? And, I don't want to condemn our whole system, because it depends, right? Where and the circumstances. Some states and some judiciaries are better than others. But we are noticing trends in this country right now that are extremely concerning and that really take the United States out of the category. Not that it ever deserved to be there, but many people believe it deserved to be there, of some sort of exceptional judiciary where the rule of law prevails. I don't think you can say that anymore. And I think what's happening to tort is yet another example of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it doesn't sound, it sounds like another version of what you had to endure in many ways, in terms of like the way you're talking about the sort of level of corruption in the city, in the state, with those in the positions of authority, in the judiciary and the police, and targeting these activists. But like, is this a new precedent though? Like targeting activists as terrorists? Has this happened before? Is this like something that, now that it's set in Georgia, if it isn't challenged, could be something that we see in other parts of the country? Like, how serious is this?
I watched these cases very closely. Let me just give you the basic facts. Before Georgia, there were only 2 people and climate activists charged with terrorism in the United States. One, Jessica Resnicek, she vandalized a pipeline. She's a climate warrior. Vandalized a pipeline. Nobody got hurt, and she got hit with an 8-year sentence because they gave her a terrorist enhancement. Because there's this whole movement by the fossil fuel industry to try to, get states and the federal government to impose draconian penalties if someone protests at an oil installation, as if it's some special category of property, that if you go to those places versus, like, say, a Walmart, you're somehow a terrorist and you have to go to jail for 10 years versus just getting hit with a misdemeanor trespassing charge, like what happened at a Walmart. So there's this whole movement by the industry to criminalize any kind of activism if it takes place in the context of the oil industry. And what's happening in Georgia is that's now being extended to any kind of activism against police, against a police academy. And, none of these people are terrorists. I mean, any reasonable definition. What is terrorism? I mean, terrorism is about, creating some violent act that is designed to instill mass fear in the civilian population to achieve some aim. None of these people committed a single act of violence. I mean, they're basically at worst are guilty of crimes of property damage. So the idea in Atlanta, most of them never did a damn thing. I mean, they were just at a music festival, So the idea that we are now calling people exercising their free speech rights in the United States terrorists is really a terrible threat to our freedom in this country. And it is designed, I think, to intimidate people and to shrink the space that the climate movement needs to accomplish its objectives, which is to phase out fossil fuels so we can save the planet. It's all connected. It really is. These terrorist laws are designed to, I think, protect the profits of mostly the fossil fuel industry, but also other industries that are destroying the planet or poisoning the air and the water, like the rail company in Ohio, in Norfolk Southern. So, we need to understand that this isn't just about protest. It is connected to larger pieces of a strategy that are designed to protect corporate profits at the expense of public safety and the expense of freedom, and yeah, it happened to me. I think back, like, they started attacking me in 2011, like, ferociously, when I got sued for $60 billion. I got sued for the most money of anyone in US history by Chevron. And I think if they if this sort of happened today, I mean, they'd probably try to figure out some way to get me charged with terrorism. I don't know, because basically my whole work was designed to hold an oil company accountable for its pollution. But yeah, it involved actions at oil installations, that Chevron had an interest in the Amazon. So, I mean, who knows what would have happened? I mean, I think I was kind of a lab experiment for the industry to see what they could get away with in terms of their manipulation of the judiciary. And I do think what happened to me, and especially I would say the weakness of our Supreme Court in not taking my case to overturn my private corporate prosecution. So those are now legal. Corporate prosecutions are now legal through my case in the United States. the cowardice of the judiciary, the weakness of the judiciary to not uphold the rule of law in the face of these corporate generated legal attacks, weaponization of the law by police, by prosecutors, and by industry to silence people like me and like you guys and like the people I was protesting with the other day. That's a key issue in the United States. And, people need to wake up. Like, this isn't just about Atlanta. Okay. It's not just about Steve Donziger. Okay. It is happening all over the place. So we've gone essentially from 2 or 3 people to now almost 50 people charged with domestic terrorism in a matter of 8 months.